So, cell types. Well, there's two real main cell types. There's a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. The prokaryotic cell, as you can see here, is really, really tiny. Prokaryotic cells are generally bacterial cells, and they don't have membrane-bound organelles within them. Basically, the DNA or RNA, depending on what type of bacteria it is pretty much all mixed up in amongst the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm is just the junk within the cell where a lot of the chemical reactions take place. The eukaryotic cell is a lot bigger. So looking at 1,000 times, or 100 to 1,000 times bigger. It has lots of little organelles within the cell that run specific tasks, along with giving the characteristic of the particular eukaryotic cell. However, eukaryotic cells are divided into two cells. We've got the animal cell and the plant cell. The plant cell is very structural. It has a cell wall to keep its structure. A lot of the organelles are similar to that of an animal cell, except for these little guys here called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are quite important when we're talking about the greater scheme of things in terms of the ecosystem, because without chloroplasts, we wouldn't be able to get energy within the ecosystem. Chloroplasts carry out photosynthesis. That's their important task. So plant cells, getting back to the whole structure thing, the plant cells have this cell wall, and that's because they don't have specific cells responsible for the structure of a plant itself. Instead, each individual cell piled on top of each other gives the plant its structure, its shape. The animal cell, however, has specific cells that are designed to hold the skeletal system, so certain bone cells that will give more support, specialised muscle cells, etc., etc. This picture of an animal cell is just a generic animal cell. You'll see lots of different cells over the time, but this one here just sort of has all the bits and things in it and has it in the basic shape. So one that I've just drawn up, pretty basic, really don't comment on my drawing. But the main key things within an animal cell that we're going to focus on this year is these lovely things here called mitochondria. Mitochondria are really important parts of the cells. They are what we call the energy part of the cell. They're important for making sure that the cell has enough energy. So they do the opposite of what chloroplasts do in a plant cell. They're responsible for converting the sugar made through photosynthesis into carbon dioxide, water, and more importantly, what we call ATP, which is energy for the cell's processes. Then we've got in this cell, we've got a couple of other features here. We've got Golgi body. So the Golgi body, or Golgi apparatus, depending on which school you go to. These guys here are pretty important, and I like to think of them as the post office. So anything that's made within the cell travels through the Golgi body, and what the Golgi body does is it, well, when I say made, we're talking proteins, and what it will do, it will just sort of fine-tune that protein to make sure that it's perfect for what it's going to carry out, and then it will put it into a little postage bag called a vesicle, and that vesicle will travel to the outside of the cell and then be released, if that's a particular protein that needs to be released externally to the cell. If it's one within, then that vesicle might travel within the cell and relocate to a particular area like the mitochondria where it might be needed. Moving around, we've also got here we have the cytoplasm. So, as I said before, the cytoplasm is the junk that is just within the cell. It's just the gooey stuff that holds, well, that sort of holds all these organelles within it, sort of the jelly, if you like, of the cell. Cytoplasm is predominantly made up of water, but it also has some proteins in it that carry out certain functions. Moving around, these little kind of squiggles or dots that that are on the endoplasmic reticulum, they are what we call ribosomes. Ribosomes are very important in the cell. They're important because they actually synthesize or make the proteins. So what happens is we've got DNA is held within the nucleus. So here in the nucleus here, DNA is held. The DNA gets what we call transcripted into RNA. That little RNA kind of comes out of the nucleus and goes into the endoplasmic reticulum, where it feeds through the ribosomes, and the ribosomes translates that piece of RNA into amino acid molecules, and those amino acid molecules are joined together through the ribosomes to make your chain, which is what you call your protein. Proteins are really important within the cell because they carry out all the cell's particular chemical reactions, and without proteins and particularly enzymes in this case, the cell would not be able to function. So to fill in a couple of these things, then this is the endoplasmic reticulum. So the endoplasmic reticulum, quite important in that it feeds through that RNA, and that's the main thing we need to know about it for Year 10 science. Our nucleus here, Nucleus is really important in that it holds the DNA. Now, DNA itself cannot leave the nucleus. It's held within that. So that's why we have to make a copy called RNA in the process of transcription to then be translated in the ribosomes. And that's taken, the RNA is taken out through nuclear little pores. So sometimes in those pictures we see little holes in the nucleus. That's because the RNA can fit through those, but the DNA cannot. This outside part here is the cell membrane. So cell membrane, important feature of the cell. If you're looking at Year 11 biology, you'll learn that there's a lot of processes that happen on the cell membrane. Some transport across the membrane, getting things in and out of the cells is really important. And obviously it holds the cell together. So why did I not talk about this one particular thing here? Well, as I said, this is an animal cell. So this here little scrappy drawing that I've got here is something that you will not see in an animal cell, and that is a chloroplast. So this was basically just to make sure that you understood chloroplasts are not in animal cells. They are only in plant cells, and they are responsible for the energy production of the plant.